Yeah. Sad. It's just sad.
What's that? How are you? Thank you. Good. Good. I know. Good morning, everyone. How's this microphone level? Good. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the June Board of Forestry public meeting. This is a one-day event. For the record, I'm Jim Kelly, Chair of the State Board of Forestry. Today's meeting will be live on YouTube. Make sure our viewers online can follow along. I'll provide some best practices and housekeeping tips. Everyone participating in the virtual and physical meeting room, please silence your cell phones and try to limit background noises. For online participants, remember to mute yourself when not speaking and disable your video when not presenting or providing public comment. We ask everyone participating today to state their names before speaking so that those listening can track commentary for the meeting recording. If you experience technical issues in the online meeting room, use the chat function on Zoom to connect with our ODF hosts during this event. For the June meeting, we have 10 decision items in front of the board, 7 in block form, i.e. the consent agenda, and 3 items on the agenda to include the Forest Protection Association budgets. As a reminder of our general order of operations, after an item is introduced, I'll invite presenters to begin. And then if board members have any clarifying questions, they will be able to raise their hands and I will call on you. And we will try to do our best to ask questions one at a time. After each presentation, we'll shift to a discussion space where the board can ask further questions or present a motion for deliberation before coming to a vote if it's a decision item. Ooh. If this one's any better. For public testimony, our agenda offers an opportunity for the public to provide comments. The public forum item, which allows members of the public to share their perspectives with the board about items not on the agenda, will be available, and also regarding informational items included with the meeting agenda. Testimony under the public forum is limited to 3 minutes. We do understand that's not a lot of time, but if you would like to share more information with the board, we recommend sending written testimony to the Board of Forestry email to enter it into the record for the June 2026 meeting. All written testimony is due by June 17, 2026. With that, any questions? All right, I will then a roll call of board members to confirm that we have a quorum for today's items. Liz Akpawa.
Chair Kelly, I am here.
Keith Curtis.
Present.
Ben Doimling.
Here.
Joe Justice.
Here.
Lexi Lovecchio.
Here.
And I'm here obviously as well. Our next, Brenda, how did boy, oh boy, I need to retire. Brenda McComb.
It's okay, Jim. This is fine. I think I'm here.
Did I miss that? All right. Next up is our opportunity for just introductory comments from any board members, myself, and the state forester. I'd like to start with the state forester.
Is that working? Good morning, everyone. I'm Casey. So it's, let me try it out there. Better? Okay. Casey, State Forester. I'm glad to be here today. Just a couple updates. We are working on our budget process. As you know, we're headed into a long session. We have submitted our early flat pops. We have received word back on which ones we will be moving forward with, and we're waiting to hear when we can talk to you all about what we're submitting and talking about in our budgets as we go forward. Leadership has met on the moving forward with updating our strategic plan. So I look forward to getting that to you all in the very near future. And fire season, just wanting to give a little bit of a briefing. We are heading into an early onset fire season, seeing pretty active behavior ahead of what would be normal for us due to the lack of moisture, both snow, and we have been getting some rain, so that's been helping. But we have been seeing active fire behavior and receptive fuels to fire behaviors early, and we anticipate that going through the season, picking up in July, August, being peak months, well above normal potential across the state. So one thing to note is that we are ready. Our staff are on, our seasonals are on, our aircraft and contractors are on, as are our federal partners, ready and able to move forward. So thank you for that.
Okay, other board member opening comments. Brenda?
Excuse me, Brendan McComb for the record. Just a question, Casey. Will the board have input into the POPs that are being proposed to move forward?
That's a good question. I want to say I think so, but yes, I will have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, I mean, historically, that's been handled at the June board meeting. And, a couple long sessions ago, there was actually a long conversation about that, but that was before this governor. I know that other agencies have presented their POPs to their boards and commissions, DSLs, and I think the EQ, but it's been kind of quiet on the ODF side. You don't necessarily answer to this board, but I'm certain you would find we have opinions on those if you brought them to us.
Yeah, thank you. And it's, yeah, it's been, I think, in law or practice for a long time that we aren't supposed to speak to the decisions put forth in our budget until it goes into Gov approved. And that's been in practice for quite some time. We probably just haven't been following it. And so I'm just new here and reading rules and learning. So I will talk to you all about that when I can. We are working with the budget office and asking when we can bring that to you guys, and I will do that as soon as I can.
Yeah, I don't think that's new in terms of how that works with the governor's office, which does not stop us as board members from talking about things that we would like to see in POPs. Certainly at the end of the day, even though it's not on our agenda, there'd be an opportunity for any of us to talk about that. Casey, can you talk a little bit more about what your team is doing on the strategic planning front?
Yeah, looking more toward implementing it. You guys did some great work. We together did some great work on the vision and really putting that into an action plan for the agency, and something that the agency is bought into and actually moves forward, as these are our guiding lights and this is our practices. So a lot of good work in the early stages. We just need to take it to that next step of implementation.
Okay, Brenda?
Just some feedback on that. Thank you for that information. That makes me feel, those of us who were involved in developing that vision document, like our work was received, and that's really nice. Thank you.
Okay, any other opening comments? Not seeing in, I think we will move ahead and we'll move directly to the consent agenda items. And first of all, would anyone like to declare a conflict or an appearance of a conflict on the presented en bloc items on the consent agenda? Okay, not hearing any, but is there any discussion, or would anybody like to present a motion?
I'd just like to make a quick comment, and I can make it after the motion is made if you'd prefer.
I didn't hear you.
I can make my comment after the motion is made if you prefer. In fact, I could make the motion.
Hey, go ahead and make a comment. If
Okay, well then, my comment is just that I remain confused about the board's role in assessing these orders on forced practice violations. I don't think it works the same way in every agency, but the way it goes down here is we basically receive the staff report, which of course the agency has a particular perspective on any particular circumstance. They brought the enforcement action. And then we receive the proposed order, which is what this body concluded. And then we're given an opportunity to like choose from among all alternatives. Like we can entertain written or oral argument, we can remand the matter to the ALJ. But given the materials in front of me, I have no ability really. It appears plain from the materials in front of me that these are violations, that we should adopt the order. And I'm just kind of a rubber stamping body here. It's not really a contested environment where anybody else's perspective is presented to us. So with that, I do intend to move to adopt these en bloc and support them. I think that's the only thing I am in a position to do. But if this is how these are going to be presented to the board, I sincerely question whether the board is appropriately involved in this process at all. I don't have the tools to make some kind of informed decision in a contested environment on these orders.
Go ahead, Ben, you have.
Ben Deumling for the record. Thank you, Heath, for that. And I tend to agree with you on one level, but I think my understanding is this is just that is a hearing on, it is an opportunity for us to understand the facts. Perhaps staff could correct me here, but I think the three individuals would be offered to make testimony if they so chose and provide testimony to us.
That is a fact question. Like absent us requesting it, I don't actually think that's true. This is just brought to us on a consent agenda item.
No. We've, in the years I've been on this board, most of the time when we get these, nobody is coming to us, but we've had a couple of exceptions where people have actually come and pleaded and been able to talk for the board. In the years I've been in each case, that didn't lead to any change. I mean, you know, looking at the documentation.
No, I agree. Actually.
It's a huge amount of process that does happen before it gets.
No, I actually agree with all of that. And I only mean to question whether the board's even appropriately involved at all or whether this should be. I would be surprised if that were true, Ben, because Douglas County didn't appear for that big FPA action. And I think they would have if given the opportunity. So I don't know for certain the facts, but nevertheless, here, I'm prepared to make this motion. I just wanted the public to know. I don't feel like I'm in a position to make some kind of informed decision on this. It's mostly perfunctory.
That's fair enough. Brenda?
Just a point, Greg, is Greg here? Before the meeting, he had file folders on the.
Really big, really.
All of the documents, if we wanted to dig into any of them.
Like, what am I?
I hear you, just saying that due diligence.
The last guy. So, unless others, I move to approve the consent agenda items A through J as listed in block.
I'll second.
And I have a motion by Hugh Curtis, seconded by Liz Agpawa, and to adopt this in block A through J. And okay, with that, I'll call for a vote. So please prepare to vote when your name is called, and I'll try to remember Brenda this time.
Brenda?
Liz Agpawa,
Aye.
Heath Curtis,
Aye.
Ben Deumling,
Aye.
Joe Justice,
Aye.
Alexi Lovecchio,
Aye.
McComb.
Aye.
I will vote aye as well. So again, we have approved that motion that was made by Heath Curtis and seconded by Liz Agpawa to accept the consent items A.
I would be remiss if I did not commend the state forester on her excellent choice for deputy. Who did?
Yes, exactly. Much appreciated. And I will second that. Okay. All right. All right, up next is our time that we have allotted for the public forum. And this is an information item. For those participating, we ask that everyone in the queue, whether online or in person, not to exceed their allotted time of 3 minutes. As a reminder, this forum is reserved for remarks on topics off the agenda. Before you begin, please state your full name and associated affiliation if you are representing a group or organization. A timer will be provided to track your time, and each commenter will be called on by the board administrator. With limited time available, anyone who exceeds their time will be prompted to provide a closing statement and then muted. With that, Shauna, are we ready to engage with public comment? Okay, I will let you lead us through that.
Wonderful. Thank you. So today we have 9 people in the queue who have signed up to provide commentary today. To help us stay on track, we are going to go ahead and call the individuals here in the room first in sets of 4 and 3. When they begin, I'll have the timer on display up here on the screen. And then after the testimony in the room has concluded, we'll move to our online presenters. So our first testimony providers are Scott Killips, Susan Smith, Laura Wilkinson, and Amanda Sullivan Astor. If you could please join me up here.
Recognize that Eleni is here rescuing us. Thank you so much. We love the fact that you're here to help.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. All right, Scott, if you're ready to begin.
Okay. Chair Kelly, members of the board and State Forester KC, thank you for your service and for the opportunity to provide this public comment. For the record, my name is Scott Killips and I'm a volunteer with 350 PDX, a climate justice organization. My comment regards the omission of climate leadership topics in the board work plan for 2026-27, which was discussed at the board retreat in February. The board ODF vision for Oregon's forests includes the priority climate leadership. However, the board work plan contains only one topic related to climate leadership, the Climate Smart Forestry Awards. I believe this is inadequate to realize the climate leadership priority. I believe that the board work plan should include at least these additional topics: a review of ODF's implementation work plan for Executive Order 2526, a review of ODF's 5-year update to the Climate Change and Carbon Plan, an update on ODF's implementation of the Forestry Natural Climate Solutions Fund, and an update on the ODF Forest Carbon Accounting Program. Realizing climate smart forestry leadership at ODF and achieving the goals articulated in the Climate Change and Carbon Plan requires the active participation and leadership of the ODF executive team and the oversight of the board. It requires a whole-of-agency approach. As such, periodic updates to the board should be included in the board work plan. Thank you again for your service and for the opportunity to provide a public comment.
Thank you, Scott. Laura?
Good morning, Chair Kelly, members of the board, and State Forester KC. My name is Laura Wilkinson, and I work for Hampton. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning. As you are aware, the FMP is presently out for a second round of public comment. You may also be aware that making any changes to the FMP at this time would require a 3rd round of public comment. And given Chair Kelly's impending departure from the board, that would set the process back many months. What's odd to us is that ODF chose this moment to undertake a major rewrite. They tell us that there are a few substantive changes, but if that's true, why is there so much redlining? Why are there entirely new goals and strategies in this version that haven't received meaningful public comment? One thing it still does is promise to implement the radical and onerous prescriptions of the draft HCP, committing over half of the forest to conservation. Beyond that, it promises little else. The board defined greatest permanent value in rule and promised those outcomes to Oregonians. In this FMP, protecting wildlife habitats and other environmental outcomes are fully considered. But GFEV also calls for a sustainable, predictable production of forest products that generate revenues for the benefit of the state, counties, and local taxing districts. Other than general hand-waving, there are no specifics pertaining to that outcome in this FMP. ODF's promise to discuss performance measures in the fall is like buying a home before you've completed the inspection. This leaves us without the certainty and raises many questions. How will lands outside the HCAs achieve the modeled harvest outcomes? How will ODF manage the lands inside HCAs to the fullest? We continue to be disappointed in this FMP itself and the public comment process. The board has veered wildly towards species conservation and has lost sight of the many benefits provided to Oregonians from the productive management of state lands. Whether through this FMP or other tools, we ask that you ensure that there is more to GPV than just setting lands aside. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Laura. Amanda?
All right. Good morning, Chair Kelly, State Forester Casey, and members of the board. For the record, my name is Amanda Sullivan-Astor, and I serve as the Forest Policy Manager for Associated Oregon Loggers, and I'm a certified forester. As affirmed in the Higher Education Coordinating Commission's Oregon Forest Operations and Management Workforce Study, forest workers are not only economic drivers, but they're critical public servants too. Forest operators are critical first responders during fire season, and their ongoing capacity to operate in forest to maintain healthy, productive landscapes is tied directly to investments in professional development, continued education, recruitment, and the availability of experienced forest operations crews. The study also underscored the forest operations and management help deliver clean drinking water, valuable forest habitat, renewable forest products, and restored forest health through a variety of proactive forest management interventions and tactics. A few weeks ago, the Oregon Forest Resources Institute hosted a forestry workforce summit in Bend to further explore the challenges and next steps to help align Oregon's forest sector workforce needs to help meet the governor's expectations around resilient landscapes and housing, this board's expectations around healthy forests and the delivery of GPV, and Oregonians' call for wildfire risk mitigation and healthy, thriving rural communities. The HEC study indicated we need upwards of 3,400 forest management and operations workers annually to come into the sector to meet this call. The forest operator breakout during the summit highlighted the 3 biggest challenges for recruitment and retention. They included wages, continuity of work, and the cost of training new workers in a production setting. These challenges come on the heels of decades-old and brand-new decisions by bodies like this one to continue to take land out of production, shrink our forests that can be proactively managed, and allow nature to be nature. However, this has resulted in mega fires as our new normal, a Douglas fir outbreak and Fermageddon in Southern Oregon turning our forests into standing skeletons, and communities with little infrastructure that can do anything about it. If we can increase the demand for logging and professional forest operations and operators, then we can help address these challenges. Please think about the bigger picture here. The board can either further entrench and ingrain these realities or boldly move to address them head on with courage. The complete and coordinated firefighting resource and forest health battalion that is being lost along the way should be thought of and should be in the forefront of your mind. Please don't ask for more. We've given our lives to helping these forests and communities thrive. Keep that in mind with the decisions before you about state forests and the future conversations to further determine the performance measures this board would like to guide future decisions for state management. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, each of you. Please be seated while I call on the next set of testimony providers. Michael Lang, Pam Birmingham, and Seth Barnes. Michael, you may begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Kelly, State Forester KC, members of the board. My name is Michael Lang. I'm with Wild Salmon Center. And I'm going to make a little departure from my normal policy recommendations, although I will acknowledge that Wild Salmon Center does understand some of the concerns raised by the previous speaker regarding the draft FMP. I'll just say that. But I wanted to, first of all, appreciation for all of your service, but also recognize Chair Kelly. This is his last in-person meeting, as I understand. So I wanted to read a letter into the record, just showing appreciation. So, and this is from the State Forest Coalition. The members of the State Forest Coalition wish to express our appreciation for your years of service on the Board of Forestry and for your leadership as its chair. You have guided the board through important policy issues with patience and respect for all viewpoints. Through your leadership, the board has taken significant steps forward to ensure a more balanced management of state forest, including its approval of the HCP for Western Oregon State Forest. During your tenure, the board has adopted a comprehensive climate change and carbon plan to build climate resilience on state and private forests, and voted to implement the Private Forest Accord to improve water quality and fish habitat on up to 60,000 miles of streams in Oregon. Once completed and fully implemented, these accomplishments will yield benefits to all Oregonians for generations to come. So with gratitude, we show appreciation to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Pam Birmingham.
Good morning. I'm Pam Birmingham from the Astoria District in Clatsop County near Jewel. First, I would like to thank you, Chair Kelly, for your years of service. We haven't always seen eye to eye, but I am especially appreciative of you shepherding the HCP through to the final vote. It was a long road, but we got there, and thank you. I'm the Astoria coordinator for North Coast Communities for Watershed Protection, and our focus is on drinking water. I haven't had a chance to read the updated forest management plan yet. I'm hopeful there are some increased protections in there for drinking water, regardless of the source, whether it's registered or not, surface or groundwater. We are also, as often stated, concerned about continued pesticide use around drinking water. The other day I was, excuse me, looking for some older document, and I came across a pre-sale report for the Astoria District from 1999. And in there it says the key performance measures, I think back then we called them KPIs, key performance indicators, had structural goals of layered 20% and older forest structure 33%. So the goal back then was 53% for complex structure. And I'm asking that in going forward with any plan, whether it's FMP, implementation plans, AOPs, that you look at the trajectory of the department, and the Astoria District is the one I'm familiar with. We're getting further and further away from those goals. They keep going down, and yet we keep cutting. This latest AOP for Astoria is cutting almost 700 acres of trees, 181 to 116 years old. And I hear that a lot from citizens, community members. Why are we going backwards? Why aren't we increasing? And again, the points of diversion, several of these timber sales have points of diversion for domestic water. Domestic water's almost a human right. That may be a little strong, but I know I had my water system destroyed by illegal clear-cut harvest operation, and I was without drinking water for 2 years. And everything was done by the book under the FMP. I mean, well, no, under the Forest Practices Act. So people nearby do suffer when there are harvests. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. We'll switch to Seth.
Chair Kelly, State Forester, KC, members of the board. For the record, my name is Seth Barnes, and I am the Director of Forest Policy at the Oregon Forest Industries Council. Thank you for the opportunity to offer comment today. I'll try to keep it brief. I feel like I'm in a constant state of deja vu on some of these issues, but I feel compelled to repeat some of the things that I've said before in an effort to try to ensure that we stay intellectually honest in this conversation. In the simplest terms, the Forest Management Plan is a companion to the HCP. It's a companion to the HCP. That HCP was necessarily hyper-focused on habitat and succeeded in creating robust and meeting or exceeding all of the needs for thousands of species, literally across the state forest. Those decisions were already made. What we're focused on in the companion forest management plan is simply figuring out how we manage the remainder of the forest in and around the gargantuan conservation measures already in place within the adopted HCP. Please don't fall for the vociferous clamoring from a few individuals and groups that consistently maintain that the sky is falling. These voices would, for the purposes of this discussion, have you forget or ignore the companion habitat conservation plan with all of its massive conservation measures and continue your effort to further restrict management on the remaining forest instead of addressing the economic and social realities that demand your attention if the board is ever to achieve greatest permanent value. As you're well aware, the forest management plan has to actually function. It has to avoid another state forest disaster in Oregon. It has to work not only for the species, but for the counties, for the local communities, for the agency, and for the state. And it has no chance of working if we are continually stuck in Groundhog's Day with no memory of what was already accomplished and no ability to transition the conversation to a focus on the other aspects of GPV. Again, thanks for the opportunity for comment. I appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of you, and congratulations, Jim, and the other board members that are coming off as well. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you all. Please be seated while we switch to our testimony providers joining us online. All right, Carol Valentine, are you still online with us?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. It's your turn. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Kelly, members of the board, and State Forester Casey. My name is Carol Valentine. I'm testifying today on behalf of the Sierra Club's Oregon chapter, and my comments focus on the toxic pesticide spraying that remains routine in the state forest timber program. Far too many rural and coastal Oregonians have been subjected to decades of exposure to toxic chemicals applied on private timberlands and our state forests. No matter how carefully applied, these chemicals are known to drift through air, water, and soil. Every logging operation releases carbon, disturbs soil, and adversely affects watersheds, but continued industrial-style logging and repeated toxic chemical spraying in state forests also affects the drinking water of nearby residents and downstream coastal communities. This environmental injustice needs to end. As the State Forest Coalition noted in its recent comments on the 2027 annual operating plans, herbicide use on state forests isn't necessary for the productive growth of conifers. It risks harming fish, wildlife, and human drinking water. So trees can be harvested a mere year or two earlier, yielding just slightly greater short-term profits at an unacceptable cost to the environment and human health. Rural Oregonians whose drinking water relies on surface and groundwater resources adjacent to or downstream of logging and spraying deserve clean drinking water and freedom from unnecessary risks to their health. We ask the board and ODF to phase out spraying immediately. To close, on a different topic, I'd like to add our voice in the thank you to Chair Kelly for serving as chair and for your years of dedicated service on the Board of Forestry. And thank you to the board for the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you, Carol. Darlene Sherman.
Hello, this is Darlene Sherman, Chair Kelly and Board of Forestry members. I am a member of the 350 PDX Forest Defense Team, and I'd like to address the issue of performance measures today. According to the draft final FMP, the performance measures are selected by the Board of Forestry based on metrics that the board considers key to ensuring progress towards FMP resource management goals, maintaining accountability for management commitments, and supporting the adaptive management process and aligning with the IP and HCP reporting timelines. So it is puzzling to me how the plan of approving the FMP in July is consistent with the fact that the performance measures are expected to be finalized in the fall. It seems like those two need to go together. This is the way that the Board of Forestry and the public evaluate the adherence to FMP goals. So how can these proceed on different timelines? Also of concern to me, and should be to the board, is the lack of progress in meeting the legislative mandated performance measure of achieving 30% of complex and layered forest. It does not have a timeline of when that will be achieved. However, in the latest report to the legislature, a decline in complex and layered forest in the northern part of the plan area to less than 12%. This means that the DOF is cutting these older forests faster than they are growing. At this rate, they will never achieve the mandated 30%. While the DOF seems to be saying that conservation areas designated by the HCP will provide these complex forests, they do not meet the requirement currently. Until they do, complex and layered forest outside the conservation areas should be contributing to that complex and layered forest component. In fact, the dispersal habitat requirements of the HCP will demand it. Thank you for your work on the board, and I really hope you can consider these comments as things move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Darlene. Thank you all for providing your testimony and being respectful of the time limit. Chair Kelly, State Forester Casey, and members of the board, this concludes the public forum for today's meeting.
Okay, thank you all for your testimony. A lot of thoughtful testimony. Do board members have any comments on any of the subjects raised or public comments? Okay, we will then move. I think we're slightly ahead of schedule, so that's great. Next on our agenda is the Board Governance Committee work. And that will be led by Board Member Ben Doimling.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. Ben Doimling for the record. What we have in front of us is just a little bit of a pro forma adoption or a vote on the edits that we discussed at our last board meeting on the board policy manual and the board agenda development addendum. So I just wanted to flag there was one word that we changed in the board agenda development since our last meeting. And maybe Heath can remind me, I think there was one word we changed for grammar in the board policy manual since our last meeting, but substantively they have not changed. And I would entertain discussion or a motion.
Okay, before we go to a motion, since this is a decision.
Oh, right.
Need to find out if we have anybody signed up for public comment on this. Kind of guessing that we do not. Oh, we do have one person. Okay.
Yes.
I'll repeat the what I've got to say here for that. Please, Scott, limit your allotted time to 3 minutes, and this you'll be speaking to this item that is on this agenda. And so before you begin, please state your full name and associated affiliation. If you're representing a group or organization, and as before, a timer will be provided to track your time. And with that, Shauna, or Eleni, are we ready to move ahead? Okay, welcome.
Chair Kelly, members of the board and State Forester KC, for the record, my name is Scott Killips and I'm a volunteer with 350 PDX, a climate justice advocacy group. My comment here regards the update to the board policy manual and specifically regarding Addendum C, the board agenda development. Addendum C neglects the topic of consent agenda items. The board does not discuss consent agenda items and does not accept public testimony on consent agenda items. I feel that Addendum C should include a process by which board members or the public may request that a consent agenda item be moved to the regular agenda so that discussion and testimony may be provided. A case in point is ODF's annual performance progress report. For the last 3 years, review and approval of ODF's annual performance progress report has been placed on the consent agenda of the September board meeting, despite several ODF key performance measures trending below target. I believe the board members and the public should have the opportunity to comment on the adequacy of ODF corrective actions for key performance measures trending below target. But the general point is that the board policy manual should clarify whether and how board members or the public might challenge the placement of topics on the consent agenda. Thank you again for your service and for the opportunity to provide a public comment.
That concludes all public comment for this agenda item.
Just comment on the, what you brought up. Basically, what happens before board meetings if the state forester and I hear about any board members are uncomfortable with something being on the consent agenda, it is at that point removed, and that happens periodically. And same thing is actually true. What's also happened in meetings is that sometimes a particular item, a board member will say, I'm not comfortable with that. And so then we deal with it separately. And I think in terms of the public's influence on that, I would recommend mostly working through, either the board chair or with a board member to make that point of view known. Because sometimes it really is appropriate to get something off that consent agenda, because we don't always get that right. Brenda.
Thank you for your testimony. That's an interesting topic, and I agree with everything you said, Jim. That's the process we followed. My question to Ben and Liz and Heath is that the best process for the board to follow? And maybe you've discussed this already, and if so, that'd be great. If not, maybe it's something you should or could talk about in the future.
Ben Doimling, for the record. First of all, thank you, Scott, for your testimony. It's nice to know that people are paying attention to this. I would agree. I mean, I think what I find most intriguing about Scott's comments is the process for public comment on consent agenda items. I think, like Jim said, a lot of this is at the discretion of the chair, and Jim, I think, has done a good job of being mindful of pulling things off the consent agenda when needed. I don't know that amending the agenda development document would solve this per se, but I think this is a topic that we as a committee could take up and see if there are other parts of the board policy manual that would address public comments that maybe need updates. I'm not sure, but I think this is good food for thought.
I mean, we can talk about it. I mean, I don't really know how else we would do it. If we're going to have a consent agenda, there are going to be items on the consent agenda, and there's going to be a moment at which we publish the consent agenda for the public to view, which is what we do presently. And if people believe that there are items that are not appropriately on the consent agenda, they have that in advance and are able to contact any of us or the state forester and say, hey, I think there's some controversy here. It may merit attention. And then the agenda, the way we've designed it, and it could go other directions, but the way we've designed it is ultimately in the discretion of the chair. And so I think given opportunity with publication of the agenda and an opportunity to outreach and discretion in the chair, the mechanics work for me, but I'm open to it.
I mean, basically, I mean, what has happened, anytime there's been anybody with any discomfort, something being on the consent agenda, it's off the consent agenda. It's been pretty automatic in that case, so.
And we could go so far as to say that, but I don't know that that's always true. That is to say, there's sometimes work that this body does by consent agenda that is deliberately consent agenda. And I also think that that's in the discretion of the chair.
This is a great conversation, so thank you. And Jim has done a great job. I agree. But Jim, you're not going to be here after today. So
It is true.
So should there be guidance for whoever's going to sit in that chair in the future? And that's my concern, is that we have consistency in how we do that.
You know, I think informally, that's a great place for your committee, Ben, to be educating whoever sits in my position about, you know, giving them some history of how things like that aren't really spelled out necessarily anywhere have been handled.
Yeah, Jim, can I?
Yeah.
I agree. I think the process has worked really well. Quite frankly, on my time on this board, many times we pulled items off the consent agenda for, I mean, sometimes I disagreed, but you know, we actually pulled them off, and consent agendas are here for efficiency, and our discretion of the chair to, you know, to facilitate a meeting efficiently. So, you know, we can't forget that. And, I mean, I'm ready to make a motion to adopt the subcommittee's recommendations as presented, if everybody's ready for that.
Okay, before you make that motion, you know, the motion will be regarding approving the board policy manual edits as written and presented at the March 4th meeting. Does anyone have a need to declare a conflict or the appearance of a conflict on the agenda item before us before we move to a decision? Not hearing any, ask for a motion.
I'll move to approve the board policy manual edits as written and presented as March 4th, 2026 meeting, Board of Forestry meeting.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the board policy manual edits as written and presented at the March 4th, 2026 meeting. Joe has made that motion, and it's been seconded by Brenda. So with that, we have a motion, and I will call on board members to vote to approve. Liz Agpawa.
Aye.
Keith Curtis.
Aye.
Ben Doimling.
Aye.
Joe Justice.
Aye.
Lexi Lovecchio.
Aye.
And Brenda McComb.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. So with that, we have adopted the motion unanimously to approve the board policy manual edits as written and presented at the March 4th, 2026 meeting.
If I could just follow up quickly and ask Ben if you're going to continue to chair this board policy manual team, maybe this is something you could discuss in the future regarding the consent agenda. I really do think it was a good suggestion.
Yes. I think that'll make it on our next agenda. I wanted to follow up as well, and I think this highlighted perhaps one last homework ask of Jim. If before you leave, you might write up a document of best practices for your successor. That would be, I'm sure, much appreciated.
That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but it would have been useful for me 6 years ago if I had that, so I can accept that challenge. Okay, with that, we're just a few minutes behind schedule, which is not bad. So let's take a 14-minute break and come back at 9:35. How's that? All right. With that, we're on break. Welcome back, everyone. And we will resume our Board of Forestry meeting. Up next on our agenda is the Forest Trust Land Advisory Committee testimony. And we'll go right to it. Please introduce yourselves.
Oops, didn't turn on the thing. I'm Margaret Magruder. I'm the Chair of Forest Trust Land, and I'm a Columbia County Commissioner, and I have my bodyguard with me, Commissioner Will Tucker from Lynn County.
I represent Lynn, Benton, Lincoln, and Marion Polk counties.
Thank you. Chair Kelly, I'd like to thank you and Board Member Curtis for attending our recent Forest Trust Lands meeting. We appreciated that, and they're open. Our meetings are open to all board members, and we're very appreciative of anybody who would like to attend and speak with us. State Forester Casey, glad that you were able to attend our meeting as well. And this meeting with the Board of Forestry and our Forest Trust Land meetings are an opportunity for us to engage and advise you and the Board of Forestry on matters related to state forest management, which is our statutory duty under ORS 526.156 to provide advice on these matters. It's a duty that is core to our role and as your partners in state forest management. So I look forward to working with you and the rest of the board as on behalf of the Forest Trust Land Council and Columbia County. Statute requires the state forester the responsibility to manage state forests under the authority and direction of the Board of Forestry, and to manage state forests to secure the greatest permanent value of those lands to the state. That's according to ORS 530.050. Greatest permanent value is specifically defined in OAR 629-035-0020. That Oregon Administrative Rule states greatest permanent value means healthy, productible, and sustainable forest ecosystems that over time and across landscape provide a full range of social, economic, and environmental benefits to the people of Oregon. Forest Trust Land Council has partnered with previous state foresters on this, and we're ready to partner with you in this shared effort to provide greatest permanent value. Board, in previous public comments regarding the draft forest management plan, we had identified areas for improvement. During the most recent Forest Trust Land Council meeting on May 22nd, we received a presentation from ODF staff regarding the draft FMP dated May 2026. Although a number of our previous comments had been factored in, I'd like to address one issue that came up during that May meeting. In this presentation, ODF staff presented a draft that we believe weakens the forest management plan. In particular, we want to bring to your attention to the board packet that was posted online as recently as yesterday afternoon. And specifically, Principle 3 now states the FMP will provide sufficient revenue to ensure ODF's ability to manage, conserve, and invest in the forest in order to provide greatest permanent value. We believe this language is correct. ODF has changed the description of this principle, stating that the FMP strives to provide sufficient revenue to support the stewardship of these forest lands and produce economic, social, and environmental benefits. The word strive struck all of us, and we had lots of comments. The FMP will provide sufficient revenue and the FMP strives to provide sufficient revenue are two entirely fundamentally different statements. One says that something will happen, and the other implies simply trying is good enough. An FMP that strives to provide sufficient revenue appears to be inconsistent with both statute and rule. Statute and rule direct ODF to manage state forests to secure the greatest permanent value, and specifically require providing a full range of social, economic, and environmental benefits to the people of Oregon. Neither ORS nor OAR direct ODF to merely strive to manage in this manner. ODF has stated that the intent of the phrase strive to provide is to account for factors beyond ODF's control, including log prices and the timing of harvest intervals. As beneficiaries of the revenue ODF generates, we're well aware that revenue flow can be inconsistent. However, as a county commissioner and a longtime farm owner, I know that revenue expectations can change in unpredictable ways. I also know that changing markets are something you have to plan for. County commissioners, farmers, small business owners cannot retreat and say we strive to provide services or strive to make payroll. We must plan for how to do so in good times and in difficult times. I believe ODF should do the same. Forest of Trustlands Council, is prepared to support ODF in this endeavor. However, what we cannot do is support a weakening of ODF's commitment of greatest permanent value. We neither believe that commitment should be weakened, nor do we believe it can be weakened unilaterally by the department. As long as the statute directs ODF to management for greatest permanent value, ODF must do so. Only the legislature could change that. This was conveyed to the department during our Forest Trust Lands meeting. Chair Kelly and Board Member Curtis, you can recall, we pushed the department a great deal on this issue. I'm pleased to say to the board, the version that has been posted for public comment that we have now seen, the draft FMP dated June 2026, retains the prior language. It specifically calls out that ODF will provide sufficient revenue to ensure ODF's ability to manage, conserve, and invest in the forest in order to provide greatest permanent value. Counties are greatly appreciative of ODF hearing our concerns and retaining this previous language. As we continue to partner on state forests going forward, we also ask that the board, ODF, and state forester draw lessons from this planning effort to improve future planning. ODF described at the Forest Trust Land meeting the stages of FMP planning. The timeline began in 2018 when the board approved guiding principles. In fact, work started before that to develop these principles and to gather public input. Over the 8 years since then, ODF has received input from the counties and stakeholders. ODF has produced draft goals, draft strategies, and draft plans. Even so, ODF continued to make changes to the plan right up to the release for this round of public comment. Even with all the changes in that time, few were substantive or responsive to public comment. The plan itself is highly generalized. This contrasts with the HCP, which includes highly detailed specifications of what management can and cannot be implemented. We recommend the state forester to do a complete review of ODF's planning program to prepare for the next major plan. A renewed planning program should provide Forest Trust Lands a seat at the decision-making table so we can be your partners in state forest management, as ORS 526.156 would imply. Number 2, aim to substantively incorporate input for forest of trust land and public stakeholders. 3, develop plans that connect planned actions directly to ODF's statutory and policy authorities. And 4, develop plans that describe how management under the plan will ensure ODF's long-term financial viability to provide greatest permanent value. Thank you for this opportunity to share, and thank you, Chair Kelly, for your service. And I wish you good luck on that boat out on the open seas, and also the ODF staff and members of the board. Commissioner, would you like to say anything here?
I think the testimony covered what really concerned me, which was the word strive. I mean, I hate to do a Star Wars reference, but Yoda says do or do not. Well, there is no try. And so when you change it to a strive, which is a try versus committing, it really is a difference. I see the FMP and the habitat conservation plans as being partner management tools. And that for me was a huge weakening. Now it's changed back. So the version posted last night has changed. My concern now is revision control, what will be adopted. And so I've talked to Nick, and I believe we have a relationship that will allow me to be comfortable, but I do worry about revision control because it is a challenge when you're trying to get public input, respond to that public input, and you have a timeline to close out. But Chair Kelly, again, I appreciate your leadership as well, and other members who are in the queues to be changing. I will have enjoyed working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. If anybody has a question, Commissioner Tucker will answer it.
Another Yoda quote. Okay.
The only thing that I heard that I don't believe is that you hate making Star Wars references.
I have a whole bunch of grandchildren, and you're right, there are a number of them that make them all the time. Thank you.
Okay, I think Brenda's got a question, so
Yeah, just
go away.
Yeah.
follow up. I appreciate your concerns around certainty and wording. But I also am uneasy making a commitment that may not be attainable given future economic situations, as you mentioned, log prices and all the unknowns, all the uncertainties that are there in the future. And I'm wondering if there's some middle ground that could be put in here into the text that says they will meet these financial expectations given the economic and other constraints that might change that. I'm not very articulate right now, but I'm trying to think about a way to kind of couch this as, yes, that's our goal. We want to attain that, but there's some uncertainties that we just can't predict.
Well, I think that I'm not sure there's a way to put that necessarily into words as we each struggle with our own budgets. One of the things that we have to do at the county is provide the services that we are required to provide. And we got to figure out how to do that no matter what. And as you look around the state right now, whether it's a school district, a county, a city, everybody is still providing the services despite the fact that their budgets are terribly limited. So I don't know if there is, I think that's a great question. That's a wordsmithing thing, and maybe, I don't know, Nick, what do you think?
The only concern I would have is the fact that requests that have gone to the legislature from ODF have not been wildly successful. And so I would tell you that if you don't plan to make that revenue, I'm not sure with the competing issues before the legislature that we will have much of a forest plan if we don't plan. And the numbers that came out through the HCP planning processes, the numbers that come out of there show, in fact, you could and should have the revenue. In fact, you could even go higher still yet. But I believe the planning process has put forward numbers that I believe you could and will make your goal.
If I could just follow up quickly. So I agree. I think that in the near term, over the next 1, 2, maybe 5 years, there's probably some degree of certainty in terms of what the income could be, given harvest volumes. But we don't know what's going to be out. This plan should be in place for how long? Maybe 10 years, 15 years? Can we predict that far out whether or not we're going to be able to meet these revenue constraints? I don't know. And that's what makes me uneasy.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I'd just like to repeat that, when I first came on this board and the Forest Trust Lands Advisory Committee, spent most of their time just talking past each other. And it was not a very constructive relationship, and it's really changed. So I think that's something we can all celebrate. Thank you. Okay, everyone. Next up, we've got a presentation on the Western Oregon State Forest Management Plan. And I think we've got Nick Alzado, right? You're there. And Justin Federis. We'll turn it over to you two.
Good morning, Chair Kelly, members of the board, State Forester KC. For the record, I'm Nick Palizzotto, and I serve as the Deputy Chief of State Forests. And Justin and I are very pleased today to present to you our final draft FMP. I'm going to begin with a quick review of the development timeline for the plan. And I'll talk a bit about the description or describing the edits that we made after the public comment period. I'll touch on the plan themes and the management approach. And then I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the commitments that are in the HCP proper. I know we've had a lot of conversations over time about, sort of the lack of accountability in the FMP. So I'd like to address that directly. As well as compare the current forest management plan to the new forest management plan and those HCP plan commitments. Then I'll talk a bit about the role of the board performance measures in adaptive management and decision-making. And finally, decision authorities regarding approvals and revisions at various planning levels. Okay, so starting with a quick orientation to the overall process for FMP development and adoption and where we are in that process. As Commissioner Magruder mentioned, in 2018, the board adopted guiding principles for FMP development. And the division has developed the draft FMP in alignment with the board's approved guiding principles, which planning rule requires to guide development of the plan. In 2020, the board directed the department to finalize HCP development and start NEPA, and to develop a forest management plan that uses the HCP for Endangered Species Act compliance. So then in 21 and 22, we brought goals were first presented to the board, and then the forest management plan strategies were presented. And in 2023, we brought a draft FMP to the board. All along the way, there was extensive engagement and outreach at each of these steps to inform development of the draft and to make improvements. In 23 and 24, we had a number of very productive conversations with the counties, leading to the development of the modeled scenarios, which we presented in June of 25. And then in November of 2025, rulemaking was initiated with a 90-day public comment period that ended on January 30th. At that time, we presented select outcomes for the 30-year step-down scenario, starting at 215 plus or minus 5% for the first decade. In 26, we have revised the document mostly to improve readability and clarity of intent. And it's still a high-level document, and this gives this board and future board some flexibility. Okay, on to the types of edits. Most common type of edit was just made to improve clarity and readability. For example, we simplified word choices or sentence structure, we eliminated redundancy, and deleted some extraneous detail. We also corrected some grammatical issues such as tense or capitalization. More significantly, we revised the strategies for several resources, including timber, aquatics, carbon, and recreation, education, and interpretation, to reflect the current discussions we've had with the board and the public and our state and county partners. Intent statements were also added for each forest resource strategy. The intent statements are meant to provide more detail about the outcomes the strategy seeks to accomplish and how implementation varies across the landscape. We also made connections to other policy documents and updated the document throughout to better tie the plan to the board adopted vision for Oregon's forests and climate change and carbon plans specifically. And then we added additional information to Chapter 4 to clarify decision-making authorities and responsibilities for implementation. Okay, I'll talk a bit about the themes of the plan. First and foremost, and as mandated in rule, is the theme of greatest permanent value. And so here we made sure that the goals and strategies are clearly articulated, and the management approach describes how different parts of the forest contribute to greatest permanent value, and the forest as a whole provides for the full suite of benefits. The second theme is considering and engaging all Oregonians. Here we placed an emphasis on tribal engagement and also re-envisioned recreation, education, and interpretation. So it's worth pointing out the current plan only mentions the tribes within the context of the state forest's history. The division and our tribal liaison work closely with the 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon to develop goals and strategies for shared stewardship and protection of cultural resources and to ensure tribal access. The REC program is described as a resource in the current forest management plan, but there are no resource-specific goals or strategies and no recognition of the education and interpretation programs. The recent Oregon Kitchen Table study from 2024 highlighted recreation as a key avenue for Oregonians' engagement with state forests, and it's often their first exposure. This new FMP formalizes a set of goals and strategies for recreation, education, and interpretation to increase engagement and opportunities for all Oregonians sustainably and in alignment with resource concerns. Next theme is resilience to climate change. Here, as I said, we connect to the board's vision and to the climate change and conservation plan. And the plan emphasizes resilient forests and adaptive capacity. The plan provides goals and strategies to increase the forest's capacity to adapt to and mitigate the effects of climate change. Both adaptation and mitigation are key tenets of climate-smart forestry, in which forests are actively managed to achieve resource goals, prepare for climate change, offset carbon emissions, and support communities reliant on wood products. Next theme is sustainability, which is about harvest and habitat and open access in perpetuity, with the intent that we be a global model for sustainability of a public working forest. And finally, adapted management, which is the continued evolution of practices and priorities based on monitoring and best available science to ensure continued provision of greatest permanent value. Okay, on to the management approach of the plan. As we've talked about, the plan is framed in terms of ecologically sustainable forest management. And the goal of this approach is to sustain and support the health and function of forest ecosystems and thereby improve sustainable delivery of ecosystem services. Healthy, diverse, productive, and resilient forests maintain and enhance ecosystem services and the benefits the public derives from them, including timber production, and are the foundation upon which a sustainable managed forest model is built. Ecosystem services are an expression of greatest permanent value, and managing for them provides for the full suite of benefits the public desires from state forests. The management approach also focuses on resilient forests. And here, primarily we're talking about young stand management. And so this is things like species mixes and planting densities and other young stand management activities. Species diversity. And so thinking about it in terms of various spatial scales, in terms of differences across our emphasis areas, the genotypes of the species and species migration, and doing so in an adaptive management framework so that we learn as we go. And then also density management, which is primarily about concerns around water quantity and fire risk. A key part of this management approach is the use of incidental take permits under a habitat conservation plan to achieve Endangered Species Act compliance. This provides for planning and operational efficiencies and assurances that provide regulatory certainty for timber harvest and other forest management activities. It also safeguards conservation values and represents a substantial commitment to rare and at-risk species. Then we have a landscape design. This uses emphasis areas to allow for long-term commitments to conservation and sustainable harvest, while also considering other resources-focused needs. Each type contributes to ecosystem services differently, but the forest as a whole provides for greatest permanent value. And this framework allows options for future boards to make different decisions. We're protecting and growing forward the timber asset, providing unrealized restoration, to date unrealized restoration and conservation benefits, and it leaves the door open for participation in carbon and related markets. Okay, shift gears a little bit. And let's talk about the commitments that are actually in the HCP, because most of the conservation commitments of the Forest Management Plan are located in the Habitat Conservation Plan. The largest of which are the habitat conservation areas and riparian conservation areas. And the habitat conservation areas are approximately 43% of the plan area, while the riparian areas outside of those habitat conservation areas are additional 7%. Thus, half the land base is committed to conservation and habitat for our rarest species. For example, the HCAs include, the habitat conservation areas include almost all of the highly suitable habitat for northern spotted owls, marbled murrelets, and red tree voles, and a majority of the suitable habitat. And over time, management of habitat conservation areas and riparian conservation areas for old habitat conditions is expected to lead to a very different age class structure than those of current conditions. So these two graphs show age class structure over time, with current condition on top and 70 years out on the bottom. The light blue bars are the areas outside of conservation areas or habitat conservation areas, and the dark blue is inside those HCAs. And this is on 20-year increments. So in the middle there, you're looking at the 80 to 100, and about the just sort of left of middle, you're looking at the 80 to 100-year class. Thanks, Justin. Again, this assumes that 215 plus or minus 5 in the first 10 years, and then a step down glide path over the first 30 to a lower long-term sustainable harvest level that we presented to the board in November. You can see, looking at the start of the permit term or at the start of the plan, most of the stands that are 80 years or older are in the habitat conservation areas, although not all of them. And most of the stands that are under 80 are outside of those conservation areas, although again, not all of them. And then at 70 years, you can see those habitat conservation areas are mostly over 120 years old, and outside remains mostly under 80 in a near regulated forest. This map shows those current age classes inside and outside of habitat conservation areas, which are shown in red. This is for a large portion of the North Coast. You're looking at most of Tillamook and Forest Grove districts and a portion of Astoria district. You can see most, but not all of the stands over 80 are in the HCAs. Those are the blue shaded, anything shaded blue. The darker blue are the oldest stands. Those are stands over 120 years old. They occur mostly on the west side of Tillamook and again are mostly in the habitat conservation areas. The intent of these habitat conservation areas is to provide function, meaning interior habitat, connectivity, and diversity for the species covered under the plan, the Habitat Conservation Plan. They're intended to be both robust and durable. And they get older by the end of the permit term or by the end of the plan. So here you have those same areas at year 70. Again, stands over 125 here are the darkest blue. And you can see a very different landscape with a very substantial conservation commitment. It's worth noting this also provides a large lift for other resources like carbon, like old growth forests, recreation, education, interpretation, timber in the way that it gives us planning certainty, special forest products, and then combined with those riparian conservation areas, this is a huge lift for aquatic systems. All right, I'll zoom in a little bit now and show how this plays out. These emphasis areas play out at smaller scales. And so the figure on the left shows a portion of the Astoria district. You can see in the bottom of the map there, the inset, and a variety of emphasis areas. There are habitats for native fish and wildlife, which are the focus within the habitat conservation areas in green, and the riparian conservation areas in blue. The Northrop Horse Camp and Trail and several other recreation trails are shown in pink or magenta or fuchsia, whatever your preference. In these areas, emphasis is public use. There are operationally limited areas and visual emphasis areas in orange and purple. And then the yellow areas in the center of that map are proposed harvest units on general stewardship ground. And so the figure on the right depicts a closer view of those operations. Again, note the Northrop Horse, the equestrian trail there in the lower left, and the habitat conservation areas. Our operational policies regarding the management of trails and roads, legacy structures, habitat, along with direction in the FMP and Forest Practices Act, combine to prescribe the outcome of a particular timber sale operation. Here you can see the riparian buffers, which are set by the HCP in blue, and related inner gorges in those topmost units in pink, excuse me. There are clumped leaf tree areas within the harvest units, denoted in green, and then scattered trees denoted with black triangles. These areas reflect the standards within the HCP. Also note that there's a mix of stand ages within both emphasis areas. Mature stands outside of HCAs will eventually be harvested, and young stands within them will be managed to promote interior old forest characteristics and related habitat features. And you know, the horse trail in my mind, just like with this new landscape design, presents a really cool opportunity to see the whole thing. You can see how it loops. It'll move through the conservation area out into the managed landscape and really provide a full view of our management activities and a lot of education and interpretation opportunities. Okay, there are other HCP there are other commitments in the HCP that warrant mentioning. Legacy retention, which includes strategies for leave trees, snags, and downed wood. The plan also includes some requirements to maintain dispersal habitat for spotted owls outside of the conservation areas and to manage barred owl populations to reduce competition with spotted owls. There are also fish passage barrier removals required and aquatic restoration projects. And hydrologic disconnection of transportation and trail systems. Under the HCP, there's two types of monitoring that occur. Compliance monitoring and reporting demonstrates that we're doing what we said we would do. This includes everything from harvest and inside and outside of the conservation areas and other covered management activities. The habitat conservation area design and the management activities therein, our stay ahead provision, which entails that we show we are growing and maintaining more habitat on the landscape than is harvested. Avoidance and minimization measures, these are mostly seasonal restrictions. And then a number of requirements to report on riparian buffers, aquatic restoration activities, the number of barriers removed, the miles of road disconnected, miles of roads trails built or vacated. All of these are occurring are reported annually, and then there are 5- and 10-year adaptive management check-ins with the federal regulatory authorities, and it's all timed to the implementation plan schedule. Effectiveness monitoring and reporting is how we demonstrate that our conservation actions are achieving the desired outcomes. There's a number of types of effectiveness monitoring that we do, including the passive and active management in the habitat conservation areas, wood placement and barrier removal, riparian buffers and stream temp and turbidity, and species responses to covered activities and conservation actions, as well as efficacy of barred owl management activities and harvest effects on Oregon slender salamanders and red tree voles. Again, these are linked to the implementation plans with annual reporting and 5- and 10-year check-ins. Okay, now I'll take a minute to compare the commitments that are in the 2010 Northwest Area Forest Management Plan with the commitments in the draft FMP and the HCP. So under the current 2010 Northwest Forest Plan, recall there is a strategy that requires 30 to 50% of the land base on each district to be designated as desired future condition complex, which can be two different stand types, layered forests and old forest structure. Currently, across all districts combined, about 35% of the landscape is in this desired future condition complex, designated complex. The management focus in those areas is on developing complex structure, but it's important to note here that it's in young forests. So our intent is not to grow old forests per se, it's to grow old forest characteristics in young forests. By contrast, the habitat conservation areas occupy about 43% of the land base, and the management focus therein is on developing old forest habitat. Under the current plan, there are some harvest limitations in mapped desired future condition complex. We can manage most stands, but there is delayed harvest of current old forest structure. So if you're in the landscape design, you're mapped as desired future condition, and you are actually already there, there's delayed harvest of those stands. In the HCP, you know, as I said, there's some 270,000 acres in the habitat conservation areas. 75,000 acres of those are available for harvest over the first 30 years. The current plan uses a shifting mosaic with terrestrial anchors. So the desired future condition complex areas can move around the landscape. You need to have other areas to move into that are also can promote those conditions, but theoretically the whole thing can move. By contrast, the new draft FMP with the HCP, these conservation areas are relatively fixed over over 70 years. Some differences in buffers between the two plans. Under the current plan for type F and large or for fish streams and large and medium non-fish streams, the buffers are 100 feet, though the way that we leave trees into there, it often exceeds that. And so it sometimes can be as high as 120. Contrast that to the draft FMP and HCP, it's just 120 for both fish streams and large and medium non-fish. Small non-fish, 25 feet under the current plan, 35 feet under the new plan. Seasonal potential debris flow tracks, I always get that acronym wrong, and high energy streams. So these are areas that have the potential seasonally to discharge into fish streams. They get 25-foot buffer under the current plan, 35 feet under the new plan. And then there's this new thing called a process protection zone under the new plan, which is that the first 500 feet of non-fish streams get an additional buffer where they go into fish streams. And so small non-fish will also have a 120-foot buffer on the first 500 feet back from a upstream of a fish stream. One of the big differences in these buffers is under the current plan, there's no harvest within the first 25 feet, but thinning is allowed in the rest of the buffer as long as it promotes a mature forest condition. Whereas under the new draft FMP with the Habitat Conservation Plan, there is no harvest in these buffers. Okay. Then legacy retention. As I said, this is, leave trees and snags and downed wood. The current plan requires 5 trees per acre. However, that is averaged at a landscape scale, and the riparian buffers are allowed to be counted towards that. So on the surface, that seems like you're getting more trees than you do under the draft FMP and HCP, but the new plan calls for 2 trees per acre at a harvest unit scale, and those riparian conservation areas do not count. So we are talking, you're going to get more upland leaf trees under the current plan, and you're going to see them in every harvest unit as opposed to under the new plan than under the current plan. Current plan, there's no emphasis for those leaf trees. There's no requirement that leaves be held again through the next rotation. Under the new FMP, the emphasis for leaf trees is on large trees, old trees, and diversity. And those leaf trees are required to be kept through subsequent rotations. Snags and downwood are really similar. It's 2 hard snags per acre and 600 cubic feet per acre of hard logs. And under the current plan, new plan, it's the same with the additional specification that you retain all like old soft snags and downed logs, large legacy snags and logs. Quick point on that actually though. And so, we're managing for retention of large trees that can then become the next generation of large snags and downed wood, thus ensuring key habitat elements that are integral to ecosystem function and many ecological processes are continually recruited in harvest units across the landscape and through time. Comparing some of the other resources among the 2 plans, For both plans, roads and trails, the standards and best management practices we currently implement will still be implemented. In addition, there are new HCP requirements that will take effect. And so, as I've mentioned, requirements around hydrologic connectivity. So there are timelines for assessment and repair of trails and roads. There are some trail limitations within the conservation areas, primarily, so there's a cap, but it's a large cap that our rec program drove the estimate of, and it's not intended to act as a cap. It reflects what we think we'd actually build over time. But we are going to look at kind of where those new trails go, taking into account some of the habitat considerations, and whether it's the most efficient path forward, if there's anything else that's economically feasible, et cetera. There's some increased winter limitations for construction, improvement, and hauling on roads. Some other differences, as I said earlier, climate change is mentioned once in the 2010 plan. It's just mentioned. There's no policy. Whereas under the new plan, we are focused on promoting resilience. And that in and of itself is a difference. So the new plan focuses on promoting resilient forests. The old plan was kind of focused on promoting structure. Carbon, there's an acknowledgement of it as a resource and opportunities to both store, sequester, and market carbon. Tribal engagement and recreation, education, and interpretation, I spoke on earlier. And adaptive management, which was part of the current plan, but in the Great Recession, we closed our adaptive management shop down as a cost-saving measure, and we have not ever really built it back. Under the new plan, there are formal commitments to the regulatory authorities that require us to do proper capitalized adaptive management. Okay, so that's all. In addition to all those requirements in the HCP, the FMP is guided by the board's performance measures. Performance measures are a select set of indicators that the board will use to evaluate management commitments and outcomes with respect to the objectives and intent expressed through the guiding principles, the management approach, and the goals. Performance measures have component metrics that will be monitored and reported for the board and others to track management commitments and outcomes readily across the board, across a broad range of ecosystem services provided by state forests. So they're intended to measure the plan's progress towards goals and performance in providing greatest permanent value, and they're reported annually and linked to the implementation plans. This slide shows the relationship between board-approved documents and other supporting documents and how performance is evaluated during implementation as part of the adaptive management process. So on the far left, you have state and federal laws that inform the HCP, things like FPA, the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, right? And then on the right, you have ODF-driven supporting documentation, such as Board of Forestry policy, the performance measures, the habitat conservation plan, et cetera. The red outlined boxes show Board of Forestry adopted documents. So these are the documents that you guys own that then inform the forest management plan. And then implementation plans are developed to reflect those higher level plans, and operations plans set annual objectives within the context of those implementation plans. Monitoring and reporting of operations and activities are used to inform subsequent adjustment or revision to performance measures and future implementation plan targets. The annual reporting timeline is linked to the implementation plan timelines, thus placing the adaptive management framework within the context of the existing planning cycle. The Board of Forestry reviews the FMP no less than every 10 years in light of current social, economic, scientific, and silvicultural considerations. and evaluates new info in the context of our guiding principles and the goals and strategies of the plan. And if the implementation plan, or if implementation is not achieving the board's desired results, as indicated, for example, from monitoring and reporting of the performance measures, the board may respond by directing the state forester to change implementation of the FMP through revising operational policies or BMPs or adjusting implementation focus. The board may initiate an FMP revision if outcomes cannot be improved by implementation changes alone. The board and state forester engage county partners, tribes, and other federal and state agencies, stakeholders, and the public to gather input on the proposed revision. So, and the point here of this chart, which we hope is improved from past ones, is essentially, those documents all flow into our implementation plans, which flow into our annual plans. We then conduct our operations. We're monitoring and reporting. That folds into adaptive management and comes back to the board where they're able to evaluate how we're doing. Okay. I'll talk a little bit about roles and responsibilities of decision makers in implementation and revision approval. So the Board of Forestry's role, obviously, to approve the forest management plan and the performance measures and approve revisions to the plan and performance measures. The state forester approves implementation plans and major revisions to our forest land management classification system. The State Forest Division Chief approves our operational policies that are specific to the division. Area directors approve some minor revisions. District foresters approve and implement our operation plans. The forest management plan is to be developed by the state forester to establish the general management framework for the planning area of forest land. The state forester is also required to develop implementation and operations plans that describe smaller scale, more specific management activities within the planning area. So the draft FMP, to be clear, contains the required elements, guiding principles, goals, strategies, and guidelines. However, some details used for implementation are found in other policy documents, such as the HCP, our policies, and the Forest Practices Act. All right. So I started my career here in the Pacific Northwest in 1998, doing owl and murrelet surveys for the Roseburg BLM at the supposed tail end of the timber wars. Spent the next 10 years doing ecological forestry research for OSU, UW, and PNW, while federal forest levels fell to near zero, which in turn contributed to intensification on industrial lands. I spent a few years in the private sector. I got a crash course in public processes and federal licensing, working on clean energy projects. And over my 14 years here at ODF, this is the third draft plan that we've brought to you. My career was also bookended by the Elliott and the Jewell lawsuits, with the Lynn County and Coho lawsuits in between. I've seen a lot. I know you all have too. I'm telling you, in my expert opinion, this is the best plan everyone is going to get. I said earlier, it's a large conservation commitment. It is, in fact, the largest conservation commitment ever laid down by the state of Oregon. It does so while ensuring long-term sustainable harvest of high-value wood products for local mills and family wage jobs in the woods that support rural communities and cultures. It continues to provide a reliable source of revenue to counties and local taxing districts and provides a new foundation for tribal engagement, while also providing high-quality, world-class recreation opportunities, protecting air and water quality, and storing carbon, and all the other values and benefits that Oregonians desire from functioning, resilient state forests. This plan represents a leading example of a sustainable working forest on public lands. It is comprehensive, it is balanced, and it is positioned to deliver benefits across the board. This is it. This is win, win, win. This is how we find our common ground. Next steps. We started a new rulemaking for this draft with a comment period going from June 1 to June 30, and a public hearing will be held on June 23rd. We have a special board meeting scheduled for July 22nd to return to the board for approval of the final draft FMP. We will, I'll probably mess this up, Justin, complete the process with the Secretary of State to adopt the FMP as a rule with an effective date that aligns with issuance of incidental take permits. And until then, we'll continue to implement the current forest management plan. We intend to come back to you guys in September to continue the performance measures conversation and refine specific component metrics. And then we'll be back in January with modeled outcomes for the performance measures for the next IP, or reflecting the next IP, so that allowing the board to adopt, to make refinements and adopt the performance measures, leading to implementation in fiscal 28. That is all I have. Thank you for your time. We welcome any questions.
Excuse me. Sorry. For the record, Justin Buttress, Policy Analyst for the State Forest Division. One minor correction I didn't catch in Nick's notes. The public hearing for the rulemaking is actually June 25th. I mistakenly put in there June 23rd.
You did a great job on that presentation, Justin.
Hey, I'm value add.
He's here for Q&A.
I just want to first say I appreciate the personal history and you including that as well as speaking both from your head and from your heart, and we don't get a lot of that.
Thanks. Thanks.
Okay, questions?
I do. Thank you, Nick. I just, very good, very comprehensive, very clear figures and graphs. Thank you for reviewing that with us one more time. We have had a lot of discussion on the timing of the HCP and the FMP. Any more updates from the services on that? That seems to be my every meeting question.
Yep.
For y'all.
Yes, thank you. For the record, Nick Palazzotto. So we just last week had what I think is our final, we have one more tomorrow, but essentially we're wrapping up our meetings with Fish and Wildlife Service, where we've been walking them through every line of the HCP. We intend to hand them a final draft of the HCP this month. Both agencies are still focused. It's still priority one. They're still positive that we will get through this and that take permits will be issued. NOAA is still in front, so they're just kind of waiting to get this final draft so they can finalize their EIS. Fish and Wildlife Service has started their BIOP. They need the final to complete it. We're still looking at, incidental take permits this year. That's what we've heard from both agencies. I asked them very directly last week, both of their project leads with higher ups present, if they have heard from DC that there's no intent to issue the permits to us, which is a rumor that we've heard that, some lobbying in DC has gotten traction and we're never going to get these permits. And both agencies said, we haven't heard that at all. We have gotten questions from DC, which we've responded to, and it's the regional offices that approve these take permits. It's not DC. So they're on track. We're on track. Nothing's changed except that we continue to make progress. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks, Nick, for your presentation and especially the historical account. Several of us have been through similar sorts of histories. A couple of general questions and then one specific question. So I understand that if the board approves this in next month, that the plan would become effective at the same time that ITPs would be issued. That's assuming ITPs are issued. So there's a question there. And you also talked about performance measures. And I guess for me to feel comfortable with approving the plan, I would like to see the plan become effective after the board has approved the performance measures and set targets for each one, so that there's a clear mechanism for accountability for the plan. And then the other general comment I had is that you referred to a lot of different documents. The HCP is the big one, but others, Forest Practices Act and others. And I don't know where to go in those documents to find what it is you're referring to in the plan. It's not clear. So if there's some way of having supplemental documents or somehow being able to accurately point to where in those other documents you're referring to, it would help the reader really understand what you're saying. And then my last specific comment, could we go back to the slides? Is that possible, or you?
Yeah.
You gave an example of one of the harvest units surrounded by all these other different land allocations. And then you referred to things that came out of the HCP, like the leaf tree requirements, and I think it was 2 per acre.
Yeah.
That diagram that you showed did not show, I don't think, 2 per acre, and it showed those trees scattered across the harvest unit, when in fact, 2 per acre, you could put, if you had a 50-acre stand, you could put 100 trees in one corner or along the edge of a riparian area, and there'd be nothing in the middle. And that doesn't meet the needs for quite a few species that use early successional conditions with leaf trees and snags. So
It further specifies that they are intended to be within the unit, not at the edge of the unit. There's a couple scenarios where we're counting riparian associated areas. So where you're buffering extra, like around an inner gorge, will allow that to count towards the leaf trees. But in general, it's specifying, no, these are in the unit. Having said that, it's not every single acre that has to hit 2 trees. It just has to average across the unit.
So it's the averaging across the unit that provides the operator the flexibility and safety to work around those trees. But it also needs more specificity if those leaf trees are going to achieve the goals of leaving trees in open areas.
And this is a great example of, so there is some more language in the HCP that clarifies the intent there. But ultimately, much of this needs to be clarified in policy, in our own policy as we go out to implement on the ground. And we'll encounter things like that where somebody will be like, hey, my interpretation is I can do this. And if the answer is no, then that becomes part of policy, right? So there's still work to do there to get that clarified. You need to meet the intent that they are upland trees and that it's driven by there's sort of a biggest and best line in the HCP. So you're looking for large trees, old trees, et cetera. That moves you away from being able to just point to the place you want to. There's still a balance that needs to be struck there to make sure a sale is operationally feasible. So that interplay is going to take us a few years of biologists and foresters on the ground talking through it.
Very quick follow-up. So in 1983, I think, we were dealing with this same issue.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Joe Justice for the record. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate all the hard work you've done. I'll pile on with that. I have a couple points or questions. Can we back up one slide? Yeah, this is a great slide. You know, kind of a lot to take in and trying to look at from a distance, but you know, over the 70 years of in the planning horizon here for the Habitat Conservation Plan, there are areas within general stewardship that are getting quite old, right? And I think that's just worth pointing out, that in the planning, I'm sure there's a number of reasons for that. Do you think that that has to do with stay-ahead provisions? Do you think that has to do with non-declining flow? Do you think that's not operable? What do you think that is?
Not the stay ahead. So a lot of what you're seeing are inoperable areas. And then some of it can just be, yeah, the model didn't grab it, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't kind of think. So the model might be leaving something out there that during implementation, we're going to actually get it. We won't let it get that old. But a lot of that is inoperable. Like if you look, you go up to the Kilchis there, come inland a little bit into outside the HCA's. All the dark stuff out, that's all Kilchis inoperable. And it may not always be inoperable is the other thing. Inoperable isn't inoperable. There's a feasibility element. There's a economic feasibility element. So it's like some of these things are there, but for a road, right? So the model is saying that that stuff grows. Much of it probably will, not all of it.
I think that's worth pointing out. I wanted to just kind of, I think this is great, show that and have an opportunity to explain that, because I think that's not well understood by many. There are significant acres in the general stewardship areas that will get quite old and provide quite a lot of habitat in this planning horizon. My next question is related to carbon and carbon offsets. Nick, I really appreciate your responses back to me and our conversation, our interchange. I've had some interchange with Nick related to this, and I guess I'm going to give you an opportunity to make me more comfortable with this language, Nick. Okay, because there's a lot of second and third order consequences of entering into offset markets. Okay, and I think it is wise to track these markets and monitor these markets and see what potentially happens with them. But it's also to make me comfortable that these are truly additive to the revenue of state forests. And the language in the FMP, I'm not real comfortable that that's really clear. And I think we've talked about this many times. And I just want to give you an opportunity to make this board member comfortable with that language and as it's written.
Yeah, I mean, as I've said, the phrase I like is like there's zero intent for it to supplant timber harvest. It is meant to supplement. And Mike Wilson, Division Chief, likes to say, if somebody wants to pay me for doing nothing, we're happy to do that. Or for the thing we're already doing, more importantly. And so our goal is not to defer harvest to enter into carbon markets. It's to look at the additionality that exists on our land base and see if it can't be monetized via our current, via board directed. Yes, go forth, do these things. This is your IP, et cetera. Now, is there additionality? And will that definition of additionality change over time? And so some of the guidance we've gotten to date is that the conservation areas, because they are first and foremost for an HCP, that there's no additionality there. Should that definition change, we have 200,000 acres that are storing carbon out there that aren't being harvested, right? And so if you could monetize that, that would be advantageous to us. And of course, the money, we split the revenue with the counties as well. But no, so I mean, I don't know that I can get you there, except to say we have no intent of not harvesting trees to sell carbon. We have our harvest program. Are there any additional carbon benefits we could take advantage of?
I think you're going to really struggle with additionality, inside HCA's, and frankly, I think
I agree. I agree, but if we don't carve out the space, then we don't have the future opportunities, right?
Yeah. So, you're probably not going to get me comfortable with the language, but I appreciate you going on the record again to talk through that issue.
Yeah, like the others have said, appreciate your sincerity and authenticity, Nick. a couple quick comments responding to some of the earliers, and then I'll get to my main point. Brenda, I actually think that's a smart question about agency policies that drive land management. I actually had to go so far one time to submit a public records request to the agency to try to get copies of all of those. There's a lot of them, and I think it actually took them some work to find them all, and I'm not entirely certain it was said. I had suggested at one point that they appear on the website, is to say, if you have a policy regarding recreational trails and how you're going to manage around them, we should be able to see that, and presently we can't. So I'm actually in very strong agreement with that. I'd also say here, with regard to this map, as we were approaching the HCP vote, as a matter of history, you can kind of see what I was trying to do. You can see, like in the north up there, those yellow areas that are like under 50 years old that are included within the HCAs. We were trying to move those out and then move in some of these inoperable acres into the HCAs to try to conserve these without committing so much acreage that was not otherwise old, at least not yet, right? That is to say, this plan is premised on there's stuff that they've included here that's under 25 years old that may not have complex structure even within the permit term. They're grabbing productive they're grabbing productive lands that have been recently harvested in order to have this kind of complex suite of lands and connectivity that we didn't think were necessary. And the agency did it anyway, and it just kind of went. And so, fine. That happened, that vote happened, there really wasn't any jockeying for acres to be done, and now we're settled. And actually, we've got in the AOPs an example this time around where an HCA comes down past the road and we're gonna have to actually harvest through a stand of trees in order to get to across the HCA boundary, which is nuts, just evidence that the HCA boundary is drafted in weird places. Nevertheless, to my point, Nick, I appreciate your position that this is like the best the state's going to get, and you've worked hard to try and deliver on that. But we just had 45 minutes of presentation from you with specific numbers, with buffer widths, with lines drawn on maps, with real deliverables in terms of conservation commitments. And what we've had so far in terms of how are we going to manage these lands going forward has been a presentation by ODF to this board that says, well, we think we can do this, but you can't actually tell us to do it. That is to say, this is kind of what we're thinking about. But it's just modeled. It's not modeled, and it was very explicitly offered in the context of, this isn't a promise, this is just a modeled scenario, and you styled it as a scenario. And I think the challenge with this is that you're telling a lot of Oregonians to take it on faith that that leg of the stool is actually going to come through. These conservation commitments are in legal instruments. I mean, that's in the Habitat Conservation Plan. It'll be approved and a prerequisite to the incidental take permits. But how are we going to manage on a go-forward basis in these HCAs? What volumes is that going to deliver? That's all kind of on a, hey, we got you, don't worry about it. And I think that's asking a lot of the public. I had recommended at one time that, and honestly, I seem to recall it being in the timelines for this process early on. I had recommended that you actually print the implementation plan, the IP, the 10-year IP, and make it available. We don't vote on the IP, but then at least the board would have visibility on the first 10 years. This is how we intend to manage. This is ODF going on record that if you approve this FMP, this is what we intend to sign. And obviously there's no instruction from us that you have to do that, but I think everybody would be on the up and up, and we would be communicating to one another. These are my expectations, at least regarding these first 10 years. And it's sad to me that the IPs appear to be put off so far. I wonder if there's not even opportunity yet by July to put an IP in front of this, body and say, look, here's the thing we intend to do. Absent that, again, you're asking me as a board member to take a vote with really crisp specifics, with maps, with lines drawn on them, and without any real understanding about, how these rural communities are going to fare in terms of harvest volumes.
Yeah. Go ahead. I think what you suggested, I understand, would be great from a certain perspective, but I think it's kind of legally dubious because you're then saying, hey, this is what our responsibility is as a board and what it's not. Oh, but by the way, until we see that actual plan, that, you know, implementation plans, we're not going to approve forest management plan. To me, you've effectively gone beyond our authority.
I don't agree, but
that's fine. Ben.
Ben Doimling for the records. Thank you, Nick, for that great presentation. And following on Heath, on your comments, because I think there is so much flexibility in this plan that there's any vote that we might take on this is relying on a lot of trust. And I think the key ingredient there is the performance measures and the performance measure targets, metrics, trends. And that is an opportunity, Heath, for the board to put a finer point on how this unfolds. We haven't done that work yet. And I understand the timeline logistics that we're in, and it is challenging. And I haven't been along for the ride as long as many of the people here in the room, but I feel like I've been along for a pretty long ride on this. And I'm excited that we're in the home stretch, and I generally think this is the result of a huge amount of work, and I'm cautiously optimistic about what's in front of us. But for me to have real comfort in this forest management plan, we need, as a board, to do a lot of work around these performance measure targets. And there's an unfortunate timeline here. I mean, you've proposed that that's happening in September. We will be asked to approve this in July. I guess I'm just making a public commitment that I see those as inextricably linked. And as long as I'm on the board, I'm very interested in exercising the board's authority in seeing these performance measure targets through and being something that is adopted by the board and is meaningful guidance and direction that the board exercises over this plan. So despite the fact that the timelines are backwards in some ways, I think I have a very clear end goal of what this is, and I look forward to seeing that through with the board.
it's, if I may, you know, I think that sounds right in the abstract. I'm very worried about how that plays out in the specifics. That is, say, I can imagine circumstances like a performance measure that describes leaf tree distribution that has real management impacts that we may not understand. And at the same time, we know that this board can't give annual harvest targets to ODF. And so what I think the likelihood there, well, I think there's a very real risk that this board could casually wander into very meaningful, or at least material, additional restrictions on management of the forest without any crisp understanding of affirmative management of the forest.
With due respect, Heath, I don't think this board casually wanders into anything. I have deep respect for all the members on the board. We're a bunch of smart folks, to toot my own horn here.
And I don't mean it like that. I just mean we won't have the information, that the modeling won't be there. That is to say, we will be making the decision ignorant of the impacts, necessarily ignorant of the impacts of our decision.
And maybe those performance measure work takes some more time, but I have complete faith in this board to navigate what are going to be hard conversations, but with eyes wide open. And I think we can get to a good outcome.
For the record, Nick Palazzotto, you know, even with that, like HCP timeline aside, if we were working on a new plan, the sequencing I think would be the same. We'd be bringing you an FMP that we need to get approved so that we can do an IP. so that we can do an AOP as soon as possible, right? And that's where we are today. We need to know that, yes, this is the framework for the IP, so we can model that. We've said, you know, unfortunate as it is, that guidance at this point, we did bring those 4 scenarios. We all had a conversation that led to the scenario that we're now bringing forward, intending to bring into that IP. When we show up in January, if we're on track with the current schedule here, with those outcomes for all those performance measures, it's going to reflect that harvest level. So with the caveat of unless you change some trend in a way that then further constrains that number. If that happens, we'll flag that for the board and say, hey, this one, like that could have an implication and we're going to need to understand how that affects the harvest level. All of that needs to occur so that in fiscal 28, we have an AOP that reflects that harvest level. And so to me, I understand that the sequencing seems, there's a lot of uncertainty like over the first half of that sequencing. It should very quickly populate. The numbers you guys are looking for should very quickly come forward. And there's opportunities to adjust them, as you said.
Okay, thank you, Nick, Justin. That'll conclude the part of the agenda. Appreciate it very much. Next up on our agenda before lunch will be a wildfire outlook and readiness report. I think we're welcoming Michael Curran and Ron Graham. Leave it. You guys take over.
Okay, good morning, Chair Kelly, State Forester Casey, other members of the board. For the record, my name is Michael Curran, and I'm the Chief of Fire Protection for ODF. And I'll let Ron introduce himself.
Good morning, Chair Kelly, members of the board, State Forester Casey. I am Ron Graham. I serve as the Deputy Chief of Fire Operations for the Fire Protection Division at ODF.
Okay, so thanks for providing us the opportunity to give you a fire season outlook. I will try my best to give a positive outlook on the conditions we are experiencing so far over the fall, winter, and spring, and how dry we've been. State Forester Casey really set it up well that conditions are ripe and prime much earlier this year, and we're a good 3 to 4 weeks ahead of schedule with conditions. I don't think I'm doing that. Okay. With that, like I said earlier, long story short, very dry fall, winter, spring, and that's indicative statewide. New term this year that I've really have started hearing that I haven't heard much in my 20 years of doing this is a snow drought. And that's currently what what the state of Oregon is experiencing. And that's indicative with this graph right here with our snow water equivalents. Anything below 50% in the state is bright red, or if there's actually no measurable data anymore, it's showing gray. So not the best outlook for us. And there's a theme that you'll see throughout this presentation. With all of our fire season outlooks, forecasters look at analog years to kind of see what in past years match current conditions that we're experiencing to kind of give us that sense of what we may be able to experience. So with that, 2 of those key years, analog years that folks are focusing on are coming from 2015 and 2018. And you can see a lot of similarities with what this current season is. And I'll get into a little more detail with what 2015 and 2018 were like for us. So we've had the warmest temps on record over winter and spring, and actual snowpack levels across Oregon are 14% normal statewide. So not ideal for us. Moving into drought conditions. So essentially there's 5% of the state that's currently not in some sort of drought status. And looking at our analog years of 2015 and 2018, again, large chunks of the state have declared some sort of drought and drought conditions going into the summer. So really just anchoring into those analog years the best that we can. And then kind of the next slide will highlight the comparison years in terms of acres burned. So going back through, talking through analog years, kind of what to expect. And I always like to put the caveat to these. A lot of these intel that we're getting, these are planning tools for us. It's not gospel. Doesn't necessarily mean that everything's going to be exactly like 2015 and 2018. These are really just planning tools for us to kind of get an idea of what we can expect. But looking at 2015 and 2018, some just significant fires that occurred going through 2015, really active year statewide, in particular within Central Oregon and the Canyon Creek Complex, and then the Cornet Windy Ridge fires in Northeast Oregon that occurred, very significant fires for us as a state. And at the time in 2015, this was prior to 2020, obviously, but that Canyon Creek Complex, we actually had the most structure loss in that fire that the state's seen in quite some time, with 43 structures. So further significant fires there. West Side was busy that summer as well, but a lot of activity within EOA that really showed itself. Moving into 2018, you can see some significant fires there. Really busy year for Southwest Oregon in 2018 across all jurisdictions. I think a lot of fires that summer were career defining for a lot of folks in this agency, which is not ideal. And again, a lot of the conditions that we've seen going into that 2018 fire season are very similar to what we're seeing right now. So I think in all, we could expect a very active fire season statewide going into the summer. So some other forecasts that work for some of our federal counterparts look at 97 and 2002 also as potential analog years, although those don't quite match up as much as 2015 and 2018 do. I think the one of significance that most of you are probably tracking is that Biscuit fire that happened on the Rogue-Siskiyou back in 2002. So moving into kind of a 3-month seasonal outlook from June through August, kind of anchoring into what we've been talking about already, fully expecting above average temperatures and below average precipitation for most parts of the state. The key take home for me for these slides, though, is just how wide scale some of this is, especially on that first one being with above average temperatures. That uncovers all of Western U.S., and starting to get into the southeast parts of the state and the East Coast. The red flag there for me, with how widespread that is starting to get down into resource drawdown issues we're going to have with available resources to be able to use on fires. The Great Basin region, Northern Rockies region, even parts of Southwest still, they're just in bad of conditions as we are, if not worse potentially. So that's going to be a big thing for us to keep our eyes on, and just depending on how busy we get this summer, is really just how much available resources there'll be for us to be able to get our hands on when that fire bell rings, and to help manage our large fires that we get. With that, again, that just gets us through August. Again, those are planning tools. A lot of this will be determined just with how weather systems shape up coming into the state as fire season progresses. I have started to see some things well into September and October as well, and all signs are pointing to a longer than average fire season for us, and fully expecting fire season to extend all the way into October, well into October. But again, that's 4 or 5 months out. A lot can change between now and then, but all signs are starting to point to a longer duration fire season that will go well into October. This slide looks at the national significant wildland fire potential outlook. Nothing really different from years past. Usually in that June timeframe, we start to see Eastern Oregon come online in terms of potential for large fire. So as you see here in June, essentially once you get east of the Cascade Crest, significant potential there for large fire within Eastern Oregon and Central Oregon. And you can just see those red blotches get bigger across the state, and also across the various regions across other states as well. And just pointing back to the potential we've got that's so large scale across the Western U.S. Again, just pointing back to those resource drawdown issues that we're fully expecting. So, and again, like I mentioned with October, this one starts to look at September in terms of large fire potential. again, I think we're going to see a fairly large red blob forest in the state of Oregon, even going into October, just given the conditions that we're seeing. So the other take home here too is we've moved out of La Nina conditions over the spring here, and we got about an 82% chance to have a fairly strong El Nino pattern develop for us going into the winter. And if folks are tracking that, that usually means warmer, drier temps for us again going into the following winter. So again, time will tell to see how that actually shapes up and just how significant it is, but starting to have very high odds that we'll get into a fairly strong El Nino pattern through this summer, going into the fall and next winter. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Graham here, and he'll go through some of our planning efforts to date and some fire stats.
All right, good morning once again. You heard a lot of significant information about the weather and the fire potential outlooks, and what does that mean for us currently? So a little bit on the status of where we are with fire season currently. 125 statistical fires on ODF protected lands year to date for 414 acres, and you can see that's significantly less acres than our 10-year average. Minimal lightning fires, which is fairly usual for this time of year. We really haven't hit the peak lightning season, and where the lightning fires have started, not the most receptive fuels. So those are isolated fires, oftentimes even single tree fires that are easily caught on initial attack. The other thing to point out, though, however, is our KPM, our key performance measure of keeping 98% of the fires 10 acres or less. We're currently at 92. It takes very little to exceed and not hit that with the number of fires that exceed 10 acres. Very common this time of year with the receptive fuels. We get fuels in fires in light fuel types that quite frequently do exceed 10 acres, although they do not last normally past one burn period and are caught fairly easily as well. Statewide, across all jurisdictions, there's been 287 fires for 5,500 acres. So kind of typical of our statistics. We tend to run half or better at the end of the year number of fires and a fraction of the acres burned, and that's kind of where we're at right now as well. So early indicators of some challenging weather conditions. In addition to what Chief Curran mentioned, our partners at the Department of Interior issued a fuels bulletin here about a week or two ago around some of the Great Basin types fuels, showing that early start, early potential. However, it's been somewhat normal of a start to fire season. We have seen some increased activity across multiple districts, really around all of our geographic areas. With the recent fire last night up in North Cascades, we've seen a few fires that have caused localized evacuations, level 1 and 2 evacuations. Again, very short-term, short-lived, fairly isolated events. Nothing that's giving us great cause and great concern. So not as much gloom in where we are with activities compared to the potential that's out there. Okay, so a little bit on our work with resources. Most of you are very familiar with this. We have a very robust, complete, and coordinated fire protection system where we use ODF resources from within the protection division across our districts and associations, as well as our contract community, our landowners, our forest industry workers, our other state, local partners, federal partners, and extending into our international partners through our Northwest Firefighting Compact. This year, we're tracking over 4,000 individual resource types in our incident resource agreements for availability. We also utilize the federal VIPER system for ordering resources as well. And again, I mentioned those local resources. Our districts are in the process right now of hiring their seasonal workforce, bringing those seasonal firefighters back, putting them through the normal required agency trainings and firefighter trainings. And of course, as I mentioned, they're also responding to fires as they do that work. So getting there as far as that. We've got several other tools and assets we use, such as the 86 cameras in 3 camera detection systems. We share information across those 3 systems. So I put that in with this statewide coordination is that we've come a long way with utilizing and coordinating with camera detection systems. And ODF has a really robust network of the camera systems. One we always really like to talk about, and second or maybe equal in terms of where we are as an agency across the states and even our federal partners. You know, we host 3 complex incident management teams. That's pretty significant amongst the states. There's only a handful of us states now that have our own incident management teams. Most are interagency teams across the country. And then this severity program. The severity program that's been longstanding continues to evolve. It's kind of one of those flagship programs that we have here. We're looking at a very similar complement of resources this year. You're fairly familiar with Type 1, Type 2, Type 3 helicopters, single engine air tankers, single engine scoopers. We have 1 air attack platform we're bringing back this year. Last year we utilized 2. Our funding is a little bit tighter this year. As you've heard in previous years' reports, the aviation assets, they're very costly. The competition for these resources with other states and our federal partners is pretty fierce. More and more states are setting up their own aviation contracts across the country. There was a time where it was like CAL FIRE, Washington, ODF, Florida, and our federal partners. Now we're seeing states like Montana, Idaho, and a handful of others, Wyoming, expanding their aviation capacity. More competition for those same resources. Most notably, little tiny picture there towards the bottom of the screen is a picture of a Twin Otter, very similar to the multi-mission aircraft that ODF in the state of Oregon took possession of over the weekend. This was the multi-mission aircraft purchased through bond funds. That aircraft has kind of like the latest forward-looking infrared camera detection, video systems to detect and map fires. As I mentioned, it's here in Salem now. We have about a month of continued pilot training, staff training to learn how to use the new equipment and have that online and ready for July 1 for this fire season. Really significant investment to eventually replace our Part Navia Observer, which was really aging, couldn't meet the requirements for our federal partners to, prove it, card it, and utilize it. So this is significant for us in our program, an investment that should last multiple decades. And I'll turn it back over to Chief Kern.
Okay. Yeah, I do want to touch on our new MMA and really just, that's a big deal for us to finally get this thing across the finish line. We still have, I think we're 99.9% there. We just got to get the last little bit of training in place. But just want to highlight our aviation unit and the work by our procurement staff here in Salem to really get that thing across the finish line. It's been about 10 years in the making, from the starts of the conversations to get our initial plane replaced, to getting the necessary funding in place, to now having it ready to roll. So I just want to give a shout out to those staff, because that's a big accomplishment for them, and it's been a lot of work over many years. So moving forward, last year we touched on some of the federal agency changes, and we continue to get quite a bit of questions in this arena, just given the pace of change that these agencies are experiencing, particularly on the fire program. So I wanted to provide an update with some of the high level stuff that we know, and also answer any questions if folks have any more. But I do want to provide an update on the Department of Interior fire consolidation. So that has occurred. There is the newly formed agency with the United States Wildland Fire Service, that they're taking over all of essentially the fire program for the Department of Interior. So they've taken all the fire staff from the BLM, National Park Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And now they all work for the United States Wildland Fire Service. And at the same time, as of 2 weeks ago, the Wildland Fire Service also took over that line officer kind of fire decision-making authority for all of DOI moving forward. They're still working at getting all the seats filled with the positions that they have. But we continue to work very closely with them. They have a new geographic area fire chief that we know very well and are working very closely with. But still a lot to go with in terms of changes they need to make, but feeling really good in terms of where the Wildland Fire Service is going into the summer and how closely coordinated we are with them. And we'll continue to be engaged with them as they make further changes and bring on more staff just to make sure that we're all on the same page. At the same time, the Forest Service Fire Program, if folks recall, there was a congressionally driven report or study that the Forest Service will need to conduct. And I think last I heard it's due in October sometime. That essentially outlines the pathway and the pros and cons essentially of merging the fire program within the Forest Service within the Wildland Fire Service. So there's one federal agency that's in charge of fire nationwide. So a lot more to come with that report once it's due in the fall. The one nuance here, DOI was able to do it fairly quickly because it's all internal. The agencies are all internal to DOI. It takes an act of Congress to move the Forest Service Fire Program under the Wildland Fire Service because it's two separate agencies that they have to connect with there. So more to come in the fall, and hopefully by this time next year, we'll kind of know a resolution on, are they going to join or are they going to stay their own program? So more to come there. Some things the Forest Service is doing, they're starting to mirror the organizational structure on the fire side that the Wildland Fire Service has. So if a transition does happen, there's already going to be some pieces in place where that transition is going to be a little bit smoother. And just like we are with the Wildland Fire Service, we're working very closely with the Forest Service as they work through these changes. And we try to make sure the state's voices are being heard on any recommendations that we can provide or options for input. Also want to talk through some updates on the federal incident management teams. Last year, we talked about how they went down 5 teams. Well, they continue to go down. Instead of 41 teams nationally, they're down to 38 teams nationally. Good news for us, though, the regional teams is staying at 7. We as far as the national level goes, we are seeing a slight decrease in available CIMTs, which can pose a problem given the fire season that we've had. But we'll continue to work closely with our partners. But again, from a regional level, still sitting really good that we can still maintain the 7 teams that they currently have in place. And then one of the things I forgot to include on this slide that I do want to highlight, they're called numerous things, readiness memos, chief's letter, you name it. But both DOI, Wildland Fire Service, and the Forest Service has issued these memos setting direction for their staff, which essentially mirrors how ODF has been fighting fire: quick, aggressive initial attack and get on fires while they're small. And we started to see that really come into play for us last summer. A lot of really good success stories on the federal side, and very clear direction going down to staff again this summer, which is really cool to see. So just awareness on that. Okay. So as you all know, ODF kind of is in charge of the complete and coordinated system statewide. Here you see a lot of our logos that we partner with. Really the take home for me, the outlook's not great, right? And you can see that with all the models that we've got. But we have been preparing, we continue to prepare and plan, as it is going to be a very bad fire season. And that's happening at all levels, at the ground level with our districts, to our area offices, up to our division. So we're prepared and planned as best we can. At the end of the day, we have a very dedicated staff, from here in Salem out to the field. And I really just want to give a shout out to all of them, whether it's the division staff, our area staff, all of our staff out at the districts, and also our forest protective associations that we have out there between Douglas and Cluse Forest Protective Associations and Walker Range. All remain very committed and ready for the task at hand, and we're ready to go when the fire bell rings. With that, I'll open it up for questions if there are any.
We've all got our fingers and toes crossed, and I would just only add, you guys did an incredible job with safety last year, and hope that can be repeated. So important. Go ahead, Brenda.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. As usual, you seem to be on top of everything dealing with fires, so much appreciated. One quick question and then maybe a broader one. There have been a few research publications coming out recently about risk to workers in the field, particularly with smoke, but other risks too. And I'm wondering what steps are being taken to protect people in the field. And then the other question was, at some point, would it be possible to give to us a report on the application of prescribed fire and the acres treated and the distribution of acres across the state?
Okay. Yeah, so maybe I'll start with the second one. I think for sure we can get a presentation in front of the board and just kind of talk through progress to date on prescribed fire. At the end of the day, it's a work in progress for us. We are starting to get more done on the landscape, but we still have a lot more to go as we're really just building that program internally. So more to go, but yeah, we can work on getting a presentation for you. In terms of the smoke impacts, so there's a lot at play there. And maybe I'll start with what we are currently doing. So what we do, and it's purely optional, and it's stuff, we make things available for our firefighters, whether it's masks at our IMTs, at our districts, and if folks choose to use them, they can. We're also working through, we have our OSHA requirements in place when it comes to our heat and smoke rules, and putting certain barriers, or not barriers, requirements in place, and mitigation measures in place. There's a broader conversation nationally that's going on around this, and it's a conversation we'll continue to, I know at the NASF level, and my counterparts around the state, definitely tracking the conversations. I think there's still more to come, but there are some small things we are trying to do in the interim and provide certain things for our firefighters. And again, it's totally optional for them. We can't require them to wear masks while they're out on the line or anything like that. But we are putting certain things in place to try to assist the best we can, and making sure they know what's available to them. So I know you've done some research through some other states, I guess. Do you have anything to add, Ron?
Yeah, I would just add a couple of points. Through the Western State Fire Managers, there's a subcommittee for mental health and wellness, and we have a seat on that committee. That's really focusing on those two things, overall firefighter wellness and mental health especially. So there's a network of different providers and resources each state has. We need to work closely with our partners here in ODF safety and expand our program, but we have peer-to-peer support, and we have hospital and family liaison programs. That's a good start. I would say one thing from experience that I've seen a fundamental shift over my years is it was very common to locate fire camps, ICPs, in areas relatively close to fires. Fire activity and intensity seems to maybe take care of that a little bit for us these days. Where I'm going is it was very common to fight fire all day, in the smoke all day, and then sleep in an inversion all night and breathe smoke all night. We're much more mindful, in my opinion, of that, of getting our people out of that, getting them into clean air. A lot of the crews will use environmental friendly sleeping units to help them recover. So there are ongoing efforts to those degrees. As Chief Curran said, nationally with bigger issues around firefighter health overall, I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Thank you both.
I just comment, I owned a business when we developed a manufacturing plant in Portland, and so, decades ago, we're dealing with these same issues of just making dust masks and other personal safety available, and I'm fully aware of how difficult it is when it's voluntary, because of how unpleasant, particularly, what people are doing in firefighting, and it adds to the misery. But I think making equipment just generally available and leaving it at that is a cop-out. And, in private business, we were, first of all, we wanted to do what was right for our people and not have them be exposed to things that were going to create health issues. Second of all, we had to protect ourselves because we were going to get sued left and right if we always just knew that they were in dangerous situations. But all we did, in a court of law, just saying, yeah, well, we offered them protection, it doesn't tend to work very well, not in the modern era. And so, I'm just going to say, I think, and I totally recognize how tough it is, but I think the world is us at the place where we've got to move beyond just voluntary protections. Go ahead, Casey.
Yeah, I just would like to add, the science isn't there yet on what is safe for wildland firefighters to wear as far as masking. They learned this a long time ago with firefighters who go into facilities, they're going into buildings, burning buildings, they have SCBAs, they've tested those over decades. Those provide safety in a short-term environment for people that are running into burning houses. For wildland firefighters, we're running up hills, we're long duration, 2 weeks to 3 weeks. There are safety implications and issues of potential burn problems with masks. So there isn't right now currently available an approved mechanism for us to provide. So we do provide personal protective gear for all wildland firefighters from Nomex, that is safety approved, the boots, everything that you're supposed to wear. We don't have an industry recognized, and they are working on it. There's a lot of people doing a lot of science. So we do intend to provide that once it's available. There's just not a safe way to do it right now because we can give them masks and those masks can provide other health issues that are unintended at this time. So we offer it as a safety mechanism until the science tells us what's the right thing to provide them with safety.
I don't want to be insensitive to the challenges. I understand it's huge, but so I'm glad a lot of people are working on it. It's got to change. I think. Go ahead.
Yeah. Zach Powell, board member. 2 questions. You said that you're going to have one less platform or air tanker this year. What are your plans to adapt to that, given that you see your surrounding states upping their needs?
Yep. So yeah, we'll be down one less air attack platform from last year. In terms of impacts, we'll rely on our state-to-state partnerships that we've got, our federal agreements. We still have quick access to our federal air attack platforms that they staff, and a lot of times they're working in unison. And this statewide platform that we have that'll be located in Roseburg, that'll be a statewide resource that will move around wherever the biggest need is. So we still have access to other pieces of equipment in the system if it's needed. And if we get ourselves in a bind and we bring in more resources, we could potentially bring on another platform on a short-term duration based off with the severity funding that we have. So we have options available to us. We just don't have the necessary funding to have one on for a full contract period during fire season.
Last year, also, a part of the challenge for us was the federal air attack program was anticipating some possible significant delays in getting aircraft approved, carded, and available. That's why we made the move to have 2 dedicated air attack platforms through the severity program. As Chief Curran said, typically we rely on internal and our partners, so we'll continue to do that. We found pretty good success having 2 of our own exclusive use air attack platforms last year. That would be really great to build for and to have, given the success we had last year. Just need all the funding.
Yep, and if needed, it'll take some time, but we could transition our MMA into an air attack platform if that's really needed as well. So that's just an additional tool in our toolbox that we've got.
Okay. And this is a question, this is not so much a question as a comment, but I saw the DOA. It breaks my heart in a way to just see the separation and the line decisions go